Good afternoon, everyone. I will call this meeting of the Economic and Finance Standing Policy Committee of Thursday, February 13th to order. Madam City Clerk, could I please have a roll call?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Councillor Campbell.
Present.
Councillor Crowson.
I am here. Wait,
Got you down, don't worry. Councillor Dodick.
Present.
Councillor Middleton Hope.
Present.
Councillor Parker.
Present.
Vice Chair Schmidt-Rempel.
Here.
Acting Mayor Carlson.
Hello.
Deputy Mayor Palladino. Mayor Hagan. He is absent but expected soon. Thank you.
He's expecting.
Thank you very much. The City of Lethbridge acknowledges that we are gathered on the lands of the Blackfoot people of the Canadian Plains and pays respect to the Blackfoot people, past, present, and future, while recognizing and respecting their cultural heritage, beliefs, and relationship to the land. The City of Lethbridge offers respect to the Métis and all who have lived on this land and made Lethbridge their home. Thank you. I have a motion from Councillor Dodick, adoption of the agenda. Be it resolved that the February 13th, 2025 agenda of the Economic and Finance Standing Policy Committee meeting be adopted as presented. Councillor Dodick.
Assuming no changes, I call the question.
Question's been called. All in favor? That carries. And now we have the consent agenda. I have a motion from Councillor Parker for the consent agenda. Be it resolved that the Economic and Finance Standing Policy Committee, 1, approve the minutes of the Economic and Finance Standing Policy Committee meeting held on November 26th and 27th, 2024, and authorize the Mayor and City Clerk to sign the same and receive for information the status of initiatives for February 13th, 2025. Councillor Parker.
I call the question.
Seeing no changes, question's been called. All in favor? And that carries. Just to let everyone know that we are hearing, we are dealing with submissions first. So items 6.1 through 6.4 first. The presentation 5.1 will be heard after section 6 items. First item, section 6.1. I have a motion from Acting Mayor Carlson, tax refund request. And I won't read all the numbers, it's up there. Be it resolved that the Economic Standing Policy Council, be it resolved that Economic Standing Policy Committee recommends Council approve the tax refund request of 2024 penalties in the amount of $326.11 for 2318 10th Avenue South, roll number, and its roll number is up on our screen, under the section 371(1) of the Municipal Government Act, RSA 2000, Chapter M26 MGA. Acting Mayor Carlson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Any questions from my colleagues? This was in our submissions. We did have an unfortunate situation with a homeowner. It is Council's purview to cancel this if they deem it equitable, and I'd ask for my colleagues' support. If there's nothing further, I'll call for the vote.
Question's been called. All in favor? And that carries. Item 6.2, I have a motion from Councillor Crowson, Local Leadership for Climate Adaptation Grant Application. Be it resolved that the Economic and Finance Standing Policy Committee recommends that City Council provide its endorsement for administration to apply for a funding opportunity from the Federation of Canadian Municipalities Local Leadership for Climate Adaptation Initiative for a Natural Assessment Management Plan. Councillor Crowson.
Thank you. City administration cannot apply for this grant without a resolution of council. And what they are looking for is to apply for a grant that would pay up to 60% of the project cost to a maximum of $105,000. The total project cost is between $175,000 and $200,000. If we are not successful for the grant, or if council chooses not to have them apply for the grant, the project would still be completed, but we would be carrying the entire cost operationally and not looking to the FCM to support this. So the purpose here is to develop a plan and supporting tools to identify and prioritize natural areas for protection in the context of climate risks. And unless there are questions, I hope my colleagues will support trying to find money outside of our own operating budget to support this.
And I see we have Councillor Middleton Hope.
Thank you, Chair. So question neither to the mover or to Mr. Matthews. These grants always come with hitches. there is always something additional. So we're being asked to approve an application for a grant of $106,000, but the city will end up paying somewhere between $75,000 and $95,000 in addition to that, which we'll have to find the money for. But most importantly is the operating costs or the ongoing costs of any type of grant that is applied. So what are the ongoing costs that may be associated with this application?
I think Mr. Sanchez is looking to that, Councillor Middleton Hope, so I'll pass it over to him.
Yeah, thanks for the question. And in this particular case, what we're doing, it will not be required to have an ongoing and operating cost. What will happen is that after the study is complete and the plan is done, we might come back to implement the initiatives. But at this point, budget is there. We have the funding for this, but we can actually use, if we get the grant, the additional funding can be used for other initiatives that we currently have on the go that could use the funding that we will reallocate if needed.
So so Mr. Sanchez, what is this going to cost us?
At this point, the cost that we have for the whole program is between $175,000 to $200,000 to implement or to do the work. If we get the grant, we're going to have up to 65% of that cost paid by FCM. There is no additional requirement. This type of grants that FCM has are available for any community that has programs or plans that are within the guidelines that they are offering.
Okay, so $70,000 to $90,000 is what we're looking at.
Yep,
Okay, and you say that we have the money?
we do.
We do, okay. Last question then is, what is our overall strategy then, and how would this fit in?
For that one, I can probably defer to the staff that is here who is doing the work, and they have the plan that they're presenting to do this.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Rain Barber. I'm a sustainability engineer with the Waste and Environment Department. So this would be looking similarly to built infrastructure asset management plan. This would just be looking at the natural assets within the municipal boundaries. And it aligns with our climate adaptation strategy and action plan that was recently adopted by council back in July of this year, or last year, sorry, 2024.
Okay, that answers my question. Actually, it doesn't, but that's okay. Go ahead.
Councillor Carlson?
Carl Carlson.
Hey,
That would
Carl.
be good. Thank you, Madam Chair. Through you to someone, probably Mr. Sanchez or the presenters here. Several years ago, council directed to do some naturalization projects in our city parks. Is this part of that?
I wouldn't say directly part of it. I think it could be included, but the naturalization project is separate from the natural asset management plan.
Can you maybe explain how they're different? Like when I read through this, I assumed it was when council tried to reduce costs for our green space, we tried to do some naturalization projects. Mm-hmm. I don't recall any updates on those recently. I've seen a few in our green strips, our green spaces, but I don't know how they're going, and I thought maybe this was part of that. Is it completely different?
I think they could be interrelated for sure. Like the natural asset management plan would look at an inventory of what exists already, evaluation from the economic, social, cultural, and environmental standpoint, as well as a management plan moving forward to ensure that our natural assets are valued in the same way that our built infrastructure is. I cannot speak to the specifics of the park's naturalization plan. I'm not sure if someone else in the room can provide an update for that.
I'm going to look at Mr. Sanchez because I don't see Mr. Richter here.
And I'm not going to speak too much about that because Mrs. Kleisinger now oversees that area of the
Okay.
city, so I will pass it
Thanks,
to her.
Ms. Kleisinger.
Parks naturalization project is still underway as a pilot in 2 different plot areas. And if council wanted more information, we could definitely bring back an update of how that's going because we have a lot of good information to share if that were the will of council.
Thank you. if I can, I'd love to get an update on that, even if it's just a briefing note, because I go by at least one of them weekly, and I'm keen to see if it's working. It's very tiny. I was hoping it'd be larger. So,
Will do.
Councillor Dodick?
Thank you. Mr. Matthews, assuming this grant would be approved, the balance of the $95,000 that Councilor Middleton Hope referred to, what would be the funding source for that?
So the funding source would be the existing operating budget. I'm just looking past there to just get a nod from, yeah. So the existing operating budget within infrastructure services and environmental area. And I think actually Mr. Sanchez is eager to actually add something
Yeah,
there.
it's a combination. We do have a CIP too as well that has some projects. And when you look at the list, when we look at the plans that we have in place, not all the projects are being funded. So we have limited funding. We're doing what we can. And the benefit of this, if we get grant money that we can use for this, we can use the available money for other work that the team is.
Oh, no, I understand that, but when you dig deep down, when you say we have the funding for it, if you go right down to ultimately when the funding was approved that allowed you to have the operating funds to do this, would this have been tax supported or would it have been utility funded?
So I'm thinking it's tax supported, and I'm just looking at Mr. Sanchez to see if there was any sort of funding that came from utilities in regards to this.
I'm going to ask the question to my team right now, and I will have an answer in a few minutes. I believe it's a combination of majority is tax supported, but there is a portion that is also coming from the utilities.
And my final question is, these natural assets, they're primarily organic, so you're going to have changes in the treescape, you're going to have changes in the waterscape, whether there be new developments that have water sources, whether it's running or non-running water, things of that nature. So doesn't this by necessary implication mean that this is an ongoing plan that has to be continued on an ongoing basis and ultimately funded on an ongoing basis?
I will say that's a possibility. As I said before, we're doing the plan right now. We might need to come back with additional programs that will be implemented. Some of those, if you look at the water, just using that as an example, we're currently working on the water usage that we do in parks, and there is an opportunity actually for a cost cutting there where we are actually using water where we can do different approaches to have water conservation and also savings for that particular department.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Carlson?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just quickly, because I may have missed it, this was an already approved, sorry, through you, Madam Chair, to Mr. Matthews, I'm going to guess. This was already approved in our CIP. This is just trying to find funding to lower the costs. Is that what I heard?
Yeah, so I'm just looking at Mr. Sanchez and the two pots there here. So part of it's in our operating side, and part of it is in the CIP projects that Mr. Sanchez is referring to. So those would all be already approved components. And I don't know if Mr. Sanchez has something else to say. His light popping up.
No, that's exactly right.
So just for clarity, this is something council approved, and chasing this grant will lower the...
My understanding is, unless Mr. Sanchez says otherwise on the operating side there, this would allow those funds to be, that are already approved in the existing operating capital budget, to be used on other environmental components or projects that we wouldn't be able to do because this is a higher level of projects in need than the funding provided.
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Do we have anyone from the public who would like to speak to this or ask any questions? All right, seeing no one. Councillor Carlson, would you like to introduce debate on this? Or Sorry, Councillor Croson, would you like to introduce debate on this?
We're just
It's the two
interchangeable,
of you
Councillor
got it.
Carlson.
Yeah.
I think much of it was in the introduction. What we need to recall is that we just recently passed an asset management policy, and we are looking forward to having the asset management strategy brought back soon. And we do know that then means that each one of our departments will be creating an asset management plan. And this one is very specific. This is the asset management plan that is around our natural assets. And so they are looking at that area. They have done some research and realized that there is a grant that can help to pay for 60% or quite a relatively large portion of this. And that then allows the rest of the money in their budget to be spent in other ways, or maybe to be left and to be returned into the MRSR at the end. That will, of course, be determined through how the department does their work. So I hope my colleagues will support this because it is a good use of our money to ensure that we follow through on that asset management policy that we brought forward, rather than just having it as a document. We now know it needs to be followed up with strategies and plans. And this does then help with our budget, making it stretch a little bit further.
Councillor Dodek?
Thank you. I will not be supporting this. There was a comment made by one of my colleagues making the point that this has been pre-approved. My colleagues will also remember that a certain number of pickleball courts were pre-approved previously, and because we didn't have the money to pay for them, that was scaled back. This is not a large amount of money, but what is happening is we keep going on this grant creep. You know, we see the grant money available and we go, oh, it's free money. And then when you dig down into it, the balance of the money that's needed comes from the city. You know, and there's a ton of examples in the city. One example is the bicycle paths, which cost $3 million, of which $1.2 million was a grant, free grant money, but $1.8 million came from the city. And there's a ton of these things, whether it be the airport, the park and ride, the exhibition. This is a small amount, but I'm just making a statement that's saying that we don't have to take each and every grant, because as I noted, and as was answered in the questions that I asked, when you dig deep down, the money eventually comes from either taxes, utilities, or a combination of the two thereof. The $75,000 to $95,000 does not come from it's not free money. So I'm not supporting this resolution.
Councillor Carlson?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I look at it from a different angle. This is a project council did already approve. I think asset management is should be one of our highest priorities. We've seen when we don't do asset management that it comes back to bite us, as we've seen with many city facilities that have had to be knocked down because they weren't managed well. This is a budget that's already been approved, and what applying for this grant will do if we're successful will, instead of us paying $1 for every dollar, we'll be paying 40 cents for every dollar. So this is saving taxpayers' dollars, and it's doing the work we need to do, which is to maintain and guard our assets. So I will be in support of this. This is a money-saving initiative.
Councillor Parker?
Thank you very much. Just to piggyback on Councillor Carlson, we've already approved this, so if we didn't even put this grant, this would be right to the taxpayers / utilities. So all we're asking is this is just money to help cover it. So, and that doesn't give us any obligation to go further down the road. As Mr. Sanchez says, this will give us some baselines that if we want to go further, that would have to be approved by council later on. So I see no reason why we wouldn't apply for, I wouldn't say free money because it's all taxpayer money, but otherwise, at least it's born through another federal grant versus the local tax base. So I will be supporting it. Thank you.
Councillor Croson, would you like to close debate?
Thank you. Hearing the conversation, it comes to mind the old British term, penny wise, pound foolish. Sometimes you have to think of the big picture, and this is something that will protect our assets in the long run. And we know we have to make sure we have asset management in place. We know we have to ensure that our natural assets are maintained. Whenever there is any plan or policy looking at the river valley, looking at our natural assets, guaranteed, those are the ones that the people come out to. The public is so incredibly proud of our river valley, of our parks, of our natural assets, and it is inherent upon us to maintain those properly. This is creating that plan, that management plan that will actually ensure we do that, and I hope my colleagues will support this. So I'll call the question.
Question's been called. All in favor? And opposed? So we have 2 opposed. Now, before we move on, I did forget to ask if there was anybody from the public that wished to speak to item 6.1, and that is the property, the tax refund request. Is there anybody in the public that would like to speak to that? Okay, seeing none, we'll move on to item 6.3. This is from Deputy Mayor Palladino, Lethbridge and District Exhibition Monthly Financial Reporting. Be it resolved that the Economic and Finance Standing Policy Committee have received for information the Lethbridge and District Exhibition Monthly Financial Operating Report for the month ended October 2024 and November 2024. Deputy Mayor Palladino.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So the numbers are there in the monthly reporting chart, and I did have a question or two on some of this before I did make that motion. So. My question, if I may, the numbers, the life cycle of the older buildings, the numbers continually go down. That's a good thing. Is that like depreciation? I guess that's the question I had.
Thank you, Councillor Palladino. So in regards to, my apologies, I'm just trying to get the information in front of me here. So when you take a look at the life cycle, and I presume what you're looking at is the
September, October.
The September, October numbers, and it's $380,000 compared to the $500,000 that we're talking about on the old pavilions and life cycle transfers.
Okay, so I'm looking at 366,000, and then for September, and then 308 for October, and 37,000 for November. So that's good, right? Is that depreciating the buildings? Is that what?
So in regards to that, it's a bit of a timing difference in that piece. So unlike ourselves, where we have our fiscal year for accounting is from January to December for the City of Lethbridge. The exhibition is, their year end is October 31st. So what you're seeing in November is the first month of the next fiscal year. Right. That's why it's only $37,000 in that piece. So not saying that it's, so really, you have to take the 300,000 divided by 12, and that'll give you the baseline of where it should be at.
All right, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Councillor Crowson.
Thank you. Thank you for the information, Mr. Matthews. One of the questions we have in here, the CRA has been requested to change the year-end date. What's the likelihood of that moving forward, and do we have any timeline on when we can hear back from them?
Thank you, Councillor Crowson. So we've been investigating that a little bit, and we're having a little bit of, or the exhibition's having some difficulties in regards to getting that change on the CRA front. There's a little bit to do with who has access to the CRA site to be able to make the physical change. So in that regard, that's still going to happen, unlikely to happen for this fiscal year end to meet the timeframes for our financial statements, because we do have to consolidate it in. And my last information I had from LDE is that that's most likely for the next fiscal year when that change in fiscal year will occur. But here again, it's the timing of us being able to get, or LDE to be able to get the approval to make the fiscal change.
And we get these updates, monthly, and we get them regularly. Any changes, anything that we or the public should recognize as, from outside forces, inside, anything that is very relevant that we should be aware of?
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Crowson. So a little bit different than a couple things here as these come through over the next number of months. So what I'm referring to is up to December 31st for our city books, the funding that was provided in January of 2023 is being used. The funding that council approved in December of last year doesn't start till January 1st of 2025. So one of the components there you'll see is that of the original $5 million that was allocated for capital and operating, that amount will get used up to December 31st of 2024. And then, of course, the new funding amounts that council approved will start in that period. So that'll be something, it shows a little different in the statements, once again, because they're fiscal years compared to our fiscal years at this stage.
And the interest will be stopping as of in 2024.
That's correct. So one thing on these statements is another really good point to bring up. You will see up to December of 2024, interest amounts going in there. It was until after December 15th, and that's where the payment was, where council approved to pay that off, and the loan was paid off in December. I believe it was on December 16th that was paid off. So up till December, there'll be a portion of interest that's still on there. In January onwards, you won't see that. You did ask a question in regards to city forces and so forth. So there is some funding that council approved in December to actually for some of the work on facilities to also help out to augment some of the work that that LD required as well on the facilities front. So once again, that'll be some of the reporting pieces that we have as well.
And being February, anything exciting happening at the exhibition in February that people should know about?
Yes, and I know Mr. Gallucci's here in the audience, so maybe I'll get him to come up here and give members of council or Economic Standing Policy Committee a little bit of that. What's coming up?
It's your advertising time.
Thank you, Councillor Crowson, through the chair. Yeah, in February, we are pretty excited about Ag Expo. We think it will be a banner year again for us. We're totally sold out on all our venues, and we are moving some of it. We expanded it to the outside, some of it. Most of our meeting rooms, if not all, will be booked as well during that time period. So we were really expecting it to be great. We moved the dates a little bit from a Tuesday to a Thursday to a Wednesday to a Friday. So that ties in a little bit to allow people to hang around town if they want, check out the PBR, and then move out on Saturday.
Perfect. Well,
So, yeah,
Thank
it's
you.
a very exciting event.
I hope you get a great audience for that.
Thanks.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Councillor Campbell.
Mr. Gallucci, it's thanks for being here. I always, I mean, we see the numbers here and everything, but I like to have you here because you're the man that gets the sense of how things are going, and of course that's big on the mind of a lot of people here about the survival of the exhibition, how the past few months have gone, and you know you've hired some people, you've got people that are really going out and getting more events for this. So I just want to get a sense from you and from how you feel the staff is doing and kind of what we can expect moving forward.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Campbell. We're pretty excited about where we are. We have a young, aggressive staff that is really moving the needle. We are really pounding the pavement on the longer-term conference business. That stuff that we want to book now for 27, 28, 29. And that is actually going well. We're making some inroads with different groups. We're looking at a number of different revenue streams that will include some cabaret business. It also includes some sport business, so we're on top of that as well. And we're expanding our banquet meeting business as well as our agriculture sector, which we are really excited about with some of the changes that will come, new changes and additional ones for Whoop Up Days, Ag Expo, which I just talked about, and even expanding into some self-created conference business that we think we can grow for the South that will really fit our agriculture community. So I think right now we're really hitting on all the cylinders, and that should hopefully be turn into results for us, both financially and for the future.
And I'm just wondering, as you explore possibilities, reputationally, how are you finding that the exhibitions? I mean, people who show up and see the facility as it is, they're pretty impressed. But I mean, we still need to get the numbers in. How is Lethbridge perceived in the business world right now?
Right now, we've really turned a corner. They're perceived quite positively. People are quite excited. Of course, when they get to see the building and the possibilities of what we can do, that really excites some people. And we've seen that with larger conferences that are looking at 27, 28. Also, just with the different groups and what we're able to do, even locally, with some of the things they want to do with trade shows, how we're able to expand a bit. And our service level is really improved. So overall, I would say our rating is really improved. In the month of January, when we do surveys with everyone, I think our lowest survey was very good. So and we had quite a few events in January.
Great.
So.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Councillor Dodick.
Excuse me. I wasn't really going to say anything unless an attempt was going to be made to sort of soft pedal what's happening with the exhibition. I agree that the facility is a great facility. I attended at a gala there a week last Saturday. It was really well done, and the facility is great. But earlier in a debate, not that long ago, I heard the phrase penny wise, pound poor with respect to spending some money, a little amount of money with respect to some climate change activities. So I want to get some numbers from Mr. Matthews. Looking over the last year, when this first came to pass in terms of the city having being told that the Lethbridge District Exhibition is then constituted, it wasn't able to really run it without the city putting a lot of money in it. I remember the number of $30,000 a day being required to maintain the existing facility, as well as to finance the loan that had been essentially guaranteed by the city with the provincial lenders, as well as to maintain the existing buildings. Has the per day cost changed?
Thank you, Councillor Dodick. In regards to that, yes, it has changed over the period. So I'll give you the kind of math of how that works on it. So if you took the most recent October statement, and you see the loss component of just over $2.5 million, and you divide that by 365 days. Not necessarily the open days, but the used days, but 365 days. That would be roughly $6,900 per day.
Okay, and that's the number that is the loss being incurred with respect to the building. So on a daily basis, at this present time, the loss is being incurred at $7,000 a day.
Correct.
Okay. And just the final question. Prior to the city being involved in the Lethbridge District Exhibition, prior to this project getting underway, I know that the exhibition was getting a grant of, or now getting a grant of somewhere around $440,000. I don't know what it was back then. But my understanding was that the city contribution at that time for the facility was somewhere under $200,000 a year.
Councillor Dodick, in regards to that, there was around, I think the annual life cycle amount for coming to that was around $256,000, I believe is the amount. Maybe just a little bit off of that of memory. So that would be about $700 per day.
Did you say $700 per day? Okay. And if I recall my presentations correctly, my understanding was that over the next number of years, I think projecting up to 3, 4, 5 years into the future, the best we're looking at, and this is being quite optimistic, is that we're going to get up to 45% cost recovery.
I'd have to go back to the percentage-wise, but in dollar terms, what's projected, I believe, for 2027 is the grant amount required is around $2.3 million, if memory serves. I'll let Mr. Gallucci correct me if I'm wrong on that.
Okay. Well, using that number, that'll be very close to $7,000 per day, again, based on the number that shows as the loss of 2,524, 271 to the end of October.
Well, that's the bottom line amount that would come from a grant piece, but that's not the total amount of city funding. So what the total amount of city funding going into this ongoing is 4.1 per year for each year. So no matter what, council has that piece, and then there's still the additional $2.3 million at the bottom. So there's a $4.1 million amount, which was, if council members from December, of that amount, $2.3 million is unfunded, or $2.4 million is unfunded going into 2027.
And finally, despite the numbers, Mr. Gallucci, I know you're doing the best you can, and it was a top-notch event that I attended a week Saturday, and I know that the events that are held there are top-notch events. So any comments I make, there's no criticism of you at all, sir. Thank you.
Did you have a question, Councillor Carlson? Acting Mayor, go ahead.
Hi, Blaine. I didn't see you sneak in. How are you? Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to City Manager or Designate, probably. Can you just help me out with something? Because we were talking, as Councillor Dodick was saying, the $2.54 million is the loss, and I think you just divide it by 365.
That is correct.
Now, is that loss all in? I couldn't quite understand by the documents I had in front of me, seeing the statement of operations ending October 31. The top line, events and operational. So I assume that there are some events that raise some revenue. What is the operational? Is that not city funds that have gone to the exhibition? So that's what I need to know, is how much, because if you're saying it's costing $7,000 a day, but then that's not including what we're already giving to it, that's cumulative to me. So it'd be another whack.
So the net loss is 2.1, which comes from grants from the City of Lethbridge to shore up that amount coming in on those statements. The other funding, I think what you're referring to is on the top of it, and I'll let Mr. Gallucci talk about exact components that are inside the $5.4 million that you're referring to at the top of the line there.
Yes.
But I think where some of the confusion always comes in is council did fund $5 million worth of funding in this period for it, $2 million of which was for capital components outside of that. And then the other portion was for operations. Of that operational money, only the net amount is what is actually being allocated out. And so if you look between that and the next report that's coming on the amounts that are actually being allocated up, that tells you how much we've actually paid. And I'll have to quickly do the math on the flip side. But maybe Mr. Gallucci can give you a better understanding for what's exactly in the revenues of events and operational up top, or some of the high-level pieces maybe inside there that might help out.
What we do is we lump sum it, so it would include rentals, partnership revenue, which is really sponsorship revenue for events and the building itself. It would include food services revenue and grants that we get from the province, and also the admissions that we get, and as well as the gaming that we get from our casino that we run. So that would all be included in that one number.
Okay, so thank you for that, Mr. Gallucci, because I just want, so that top line 5.4 is no city funds?
No.
Okay, no. Thank you.
Councillor Middleton-O.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through the city manager to Mr. Galucci. I didn't hear and I didn't see, but I'm going to ask, how much revenue do you project for 2025, which would net out against that $4.1 million?
To Councillor.
Yeah, him anyway. Yeah.
Thanks. You know, we are looking at to be over $6 million in revenue in this year through a number of different initiatives that we're doing. How it would net out to the 4.1 actually has some components in it, and I might let Mr. Matthews talk a little bit about it because it also has the life cycle that we put aside for it and a couple other components. So our goal is to hit that, 2.3, 2.1 million deficit, but really this year be able to grow our future so that we have a bunch of several conferences and a lot of different advanced bookings, and then bring in our annual bookings that will grow on top of that and build that eventually to a $7-8 million revenue.
So this may be an unfair question, but I will ask it because I know you can answer it. When do we break even?
That is a difficult question at this point in time. Yeah, we are continuing to work hard on those future events because they're the key to the whole thing. I think our annual events are building out quite strong, but those future events, we still need a lot of work. We're starting to do it. We're making inroads, but if we can start to confirm more conferences, like somewhere in the neighborhood of at least 6 to 8 in advance of a year. Every year, then it will be in a much better position. But as far as a break even, that would be a tough one for me to tell you at this time. Okay.
All right. My last component then of this question is to Mr. Matthews. $4.1 million is what it's going to cost us to operate the exhibition over the course of this year. Mr. Galucci has just indicated that there will be a minus the revenue, which is about $6 million, but he's got expenses, obviously, that are a component of that. What's it going to cost us to close it? This is a question we've asked many times, and it's an ongoing issue, but we're told that $4.1 million to keep it open and operating. What is it going to cost us to close it?
Thank you, Councillor Milton Hope. So if you remember back to December inside of there, and I know you want me just to say this publicly again, it's aside here, $4.1 million was the actual amount also to actually close the facility. And that was because of the mothballing components and some of the ongoing operational pieces that would actually be there to actually close the facility. So, and just for clarification too, the 4.1 million that I was referring to and so forth is just the city's funding component that was going in there, not the total budget for the LDE operations, which I believe is just, I was trying to find in my notes here very quickly, but I think it's just over 9 million for the total, almost 10 million.
I like your optimism. Thank you.
Any questions, more questions for Mr. Galucci? Seeing none, I'd love to give the opportunity for the community to ask questions as well. If there's anyone in the community that wishes to come forward, if you're not, do we have any current that are registered, Madam City Clerk? Just one. All right, Mr. Feenstra, please come forward to the mic and
Bonnie.
Thank you. My name is Barney Feenstra, and I'm only going to deal with what happened last year. I don't have enough time to talk about everything that's going on with the exhibition. So I'm just going to deal with the $18 million, $70.8 million loan. And I'm going to read it off, otherwise I'll go off track. In December 24, Council made a decision to fully support the LDE financially, and at the recommendation of the CFO to use both contingency funding and surplus dollars from the current budget. Also, Mr. Matthews came up with an innovative plan on how to deal with a $70.8 million loan granted to the LDE by the city. The city borrowed the sum from the province, lent it to the LDE to be paid back over 30 years with semi-annual payments of $583,931. Only one problem: the LDE consistently reports a monthly deficit. In August 24, interim CEO Mr. Gallucci reported a year-to-date deficit of $1.88 million. I asked Mr. Gallucci at that time, since the LDE has such a large deficit, how can the LDE make loan payments of that amount? His reply was, we receive grants from the city. On June 5th, 24 meetings of the LDE board member confirmed this. In it, it says, given the construction cost as well as the upcoming loan payments, LDE would like to request some funding from the city of Lethbridge, so it's obvious that the LDE was not in a position to make the loan payments. In August 24, I contacted City CFO Mr. Matthew and asked if the LDE was on schedule with the loan payments and if the loan was in good standing. His reply states the loan is in good standing and the semi-annual payments are on schedule and are paid every June 15th and December 15th. Technically, this is correct. The loan is in good standing. However, it's the lender, the city, who's making the payments, not the borrower, the LDE. It's like the bank making your car loan payments for you. Fast forward to November 24, the Deloitte report was presented to council, and it found mismanagement and questionable spending, including non-compliance of internal LDE policies by the board, the audit committee, and the CEO. And council promptly forwarded the report to the LBS for investigation. The report also came to the conclusion that at present, without another viable financial source, the LDD would become insolvent and need to cease operations. The following day, the city administration presented its reply to the Deloitte report to council, and it did find another viable source of financing, the taxpayer. This is how it's going to work. $7.3 million of a loan that, by the way, is in good standing, will be forgiven. The remaining $10 million the city will borrow from itself, and we have saved the taxpayers $15 million and no end tax increase. I suggest you just kick the tax can down the road for 3 years and let the ex-council deal with it. And you received an assist from the Lethbridge Herald the next day. They printed a large story with quite a large heading, and it says, no tax increase for residents to save the exhibition. I suggest that's totally false and misleading. There is a tax hike, end of story. So let's recap this. The city borrowed $17.8 million from the province, went into a large black hole known as the LDE, and the money disappeared, although we do have a large building that is not really designed for its intended purposes. So the money is gone, and the LDE will never repay it. But the city still owes the province $17.8 million. I put this all to 2 certified accountants in the city, and both were unanimous in saying that there are no savings here for the taxpayer. The taxpayer is on the hook for the $17 million plus interest to the province. And to forgive part of the loan and borrow from yourself will not make it go away. The Deloitte report is quite clear, and there are mismanagement and lack of oversight by the LDE and the city as well, as the city had a member on the board. I would like to make 2 following suggestions. 1, it is time for a forensic audit of the LDD and the city involvement. And 2, I would call on the city to have a referendum on this matter on a ballot on the next municipal election. And that's all I got to say. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Veenstra. Is there anyone else from the public that wishes to make a presentation or to speak to this item? Ask again, is there anyone else that wishes to make a presentation or to speak to this item? All right. Resolution then? I have a resolution here from Deputy Mayor Palladino. Be it resolved that the Economic and Finance Standing Policy Committee receive for information the Lethbridge and District Exhibition Monthly Financial Operating Report for the month ended October 2024 and November 2024. Councillor Palladino.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. If there are no further questions or comments, I will call for the vote on this.
Councillor Dodick.
Well, just so everyone understands, this is simply a resolution to accept the information that has been provided. I know Mr. Feenstra made a comment about a potential referendum or a question at the next election. So that means any member of council can bring that to a council vote as to whether that might occur. So we have plenty of time to consider that. I just wanted to ensure that Mr. Feenstra knows that the message was given. Whether it's received, that's another story. But this is for information only. I will support that.
I appreciate that too. Yes, absolutely, just for information. And again, council can bring forward a resolution to address some of those issues and concerns. See no one further, so question's been called. All in favor? And that's unanimous. Thank you. I have a resolution from Councillor Campbell, Lethbridge District Exhibition Memorandum of Understanding, MOU update. Be it resolved, the Economic and Finance Standing Policy Committee received the report for information. You've received that in your package. And to open, Councillor Campbell.
I'll just see if there's any other questions or anybody want to have something to say. If not, it is in our package, and I would ask for my colleague support.
Thank you. It's in the public package as well. So, yeah. Question been called. All in favor? And that is unanimous. Thank you. Mr. Pitcher, you do have a presentation. 5.1 affordable and social housing capital funding request. So you're welcome to come forward and start. Oh, and before you do, Councillor Schmidt-Rempel.
I did have a question on this one because we do have something that we've got prepared to bring forward, and one of the items I will have to recuse myself from, or I won't be able to speak to or vote on, but the other items I will be able to and would like to hear the information on. So for that, I will be stepping away from voting or discussion on item 1.8, which has to do with the presentation portion of My City Care. So I won't be able to vote on that portion, but I would like to hear the information because it pertains to all of the applications. This is conflict.
Conflict or
pecuniary? This is perceived conflict.
Perceived conflict.
So, and I will be asking then for the motion to be divided.
So to hear the information, I guess, Mr. Lowen, is that fine to hear the rest of the information when you see the resolution or the presentation that's coming forward?
This is what Bill 20 says. She may.
I can hear you. Yep.
Okay, so Madam City Clerk, if you can actually speak to what we have in the bill.
So if it's just a perceived conflict, Bill 20 now states that the councillor may do any one of the following: abstain from voting on any question related to the matter, abstain from any discussion on the matter, leave the room in which the meeting is being held under discussion and voting on the matter are concluded. May.
So may. Okay, may, so you don't have to. So, okay, go ahead.
So what I will be doing is I will be, sorry, I'm just going to pull up the bill section again. What I will be doing is on the particular portion of this motion, and I will request that we divide it out. I will be abstaining from voting on, once we divide out the motion, I will be abstaining from voting on that, and I will be abstaining from discussion on that, but I will be staying in the room to listen to the information that Mr. Pitcher and others have to present.
Okay.
And
right.
I have asked the clerk's office already. I've discussed my conflict of interest with them.
About dividing. Okay,
yeah.
Perfect. So we'll go through the presentation first, then Mr. Pitcher, and that'd be great. Thank you.
Thank you, members of Economic and Finance SPC, and thank you for being here to hear and consider these housing projects. I know with some of these groups, we've been working for quite a long time to get to this point, one group in particular, over a year to get to this point. So I think I can safely speak for them to say that they're grateful to have their projects heard and considered by you today. To begin, just a bit of an overview of the Affordable and Social Housing Capital Grant. If I can get the slide to go forward. No. There we go. Perfect. So just a bit of an overview of the Affordable and Social Housing Capital Grant, which the city administers. So this grant program has been formally closed for intake since spring 2023. And that's to provide updates to the policy CC49, which is the council policy that deals with this grant. Since 2023, it has been closed, however, to ensure that funding opportunities from the provincial and or federal government are not missed. We have continued to bring forward any housing projects for council consideration, so long as they intend to utilize a municipal allocation to secure funding from either the province or the federal government. At this time, we've worked with 4 such organizations who are now prepared to make their funding requests. However, I will note that the total amount requested between all 4 of the organizations does sum to an amount more than what is currently available in the Affordable and Social Housing Capital Fund. Just continue on with a bit of summary here. This grant has received an annual allocation of $150,000 a year. And during the last CIP process, it also received a $5 million one-time allocation to that fund, which has now been administered over the past couple of years. So over the past few years, approximately $5.7 million of city investment has resulted in approximately $73.8 million of non-city investment into housing. So that's approximately a 13 times return on our dollar. Those dollars invested have also resulted, assuming all the projects continue and are completed as currently scoped, will have resulted in 309 total housing units being created, and 220 of those housing units would be held at affordable rates per the city's definition. So as mentioned, we have 4 requests here today that are requesting municipal funding, and the 4 organizations are the BIPOC Foundation, the Settle East Canada Foundation, My City Care, and the Green Acres Foundation. And as earlier mentioned, the total requested funding across all 4 organizations comes to just north of $3.5 million. Our capital fund today has just north of $1.8 million. So if funding the full amount of these housing requests, the difference would be just over $1.7 million. The next couple slides provide just a really quick snapshot of all 4 of the proposals. However, each of the 4 organizations' proposals have been attached in the submission for committee consideration. The first one being the BIPOC Foundation. So the BIPOC Foundation project aims to provide short-term affordable housing accommodations for new international students, and their request amount is $686,000 from the city. And given that this organization is planning to do a fairly large-scale project with 72 units, all held at affordable rates, the really appealing part of this proposal is their cost per unit at just under $10,000 a unit, which is quite a bit lower than what we've historically funded. The largest challenge that this organization will face as we move forward throughout this project is the securement of land and funding for this project. This is really the first domino to fall. The lack of secured funding is less concerning, just given that typically the municipality is that first-in funder, and we would expect that they would be applying to provincial and federal sources in order to secure the balance of project funding. The land for this has not been secured at this time. The next project is the Settle East Canada Foundation. The Settle East Canada Foundation is actually looking to provide a similar type of housing as the BIPOC Foundation project, where they would be providing, instead of international students, new immigrants with affordable accommodations for a predefined tenure. The total request from the Settle East Canada Foundation is $610,000, and they intend to use a scattered site approach to develop 16 housing units, of which 14 would be held at affordable rates. At this time, one of the 3 sites that they would need for their scattered site project has been conditionally secured, but is not yet appropriately zoned for the project. The other thing that I'll note on this one is that The Settlese Canada Foundation request does include funding for pre-development work, so they've asked for $560,000 of capital funding, plus up to $50,000 of pre-development funding. But when we dive into the details of what that pre-development funding would be used for, we find that most of the expenses that they were looking to cover actually would be contemplated as part of our typical grant funding agreement. So because of that, we are treating the whole $610,000 request as a capital funding request rather than a pre-development and a capital portion. The third of the 4 projects is My City Care. My City Care is planning to do a multi-phased development at the property that they've secured, and it's eventually planned to include a total of 180 housing units. The first phase of this project is before council today, and phase 1 of the project includes 40 housing units, 12 of which would be held at affordable rates. The funding request from My City Care totals $500,000, and the property has been conditionally secured, conditional to rezoning, which is underway. And the final project is the Green Acres Foundation, which plans to build 56 units of seniors housing, all held at affordable rates, and would also have a mixed-use component, meaning there would be a commercial component of the development that would be on the main floor. The budget that's included on this slide only contemplates the residential components of the budget. The $22 million is only the residential. The commercial has been excluded from that. The Green Acres Foundation request includes a capital request of $1.4 million, as well as $350,000 of in-kind supports from the city. And those are for things like permit fee waivers, site servicing costs, those types of expenses. From our perspective, it's actually quite a bit easier for us to go down the capital agreement route. And so what we are doing is treating this as a $1.75 million request. And the expenses that they would be looking to have included in kind would actually just be funded out of the capital budget. So just to summarize the 4 projects, the slide here gives an overview of the percentage of the project that's being requested for each of the 4 proposals, total number of affordable units, and the city cost per affordable unit if the full funding request was utilized. And it also shows that difference of additional funding that would be required if the full funding amount was approved for each of the 4 organizations. Just some key considerations on this slide as council or as committee makes their recommendation to council. All of these projects have been identified and they are all unique in scope, scale, timing, even just where they're at in terms of the development. However, they do all align with the needs identified in the recently approved municipal housing strategy. And just to speak further to that piece about they're all at different stages, all of them are at a different stage of land securement as well. With the Green Acres Foundation being fully secured and zoned for their project, My City Care has the land, as previously mentioned, already conditionally secured and going through the rezoning process with their public hearing scheduled for February 25th. And Settlese Canada Foundation, one of the 3 is conditional secured. The BIPOC Foundation has no land secured at this time. Now, when looking through the different options, this was actually quite difficult to come up with because these projects are all so unique that there's a lot of different ways that we could have evaluated these projects and a lot of different options that could have been come up with. At this point, administration has come up with 4 different options, with option 1 being our recommended option, which is to allocate funding based on project readiness, prioritize funding towards those groups that are most shovel ready for their project. So option 1 and 2 contemplate only the use of the available $1.8 million in the capital fund. Options 3 and 4 both also include the full $1.8 million of affordable and social housing capital fund, as well as an additional allocation from another source. Option 1, basically, the gist of it is that it prioritizes those projects that are most shovel ready while still capping each of the organization's municipal allocation at 5% of their project budget. And the reason for 5% is it seems to be that sweet spot with CMHC in the province, and in some cases is even explicitly written into grant funding requirements from other levels of government that 5% must be provided from an equity partner, which is a role that the city has historically filled. Option Number 2 is equitable allocation, basically to say we have 51% of the total requested funding, therefore we could allocate 51% of each of the funding requests. I am a little hesitant to use the word equitable in this case. It generally provides a fairly positive connotation. In this case, I actually think it would be the worst of the 4 options presented today. And that's just because it brings all of those funding requests down to an amount where it may not be considered substantial in the eyes of other funders. Option 3 would just be the full request amount for each organization and would require an additional $1.7 million from funding held in reserve as matching funds in the 2022 to 2031 CIP. And option number 4 is basically the same as option number 3, with each of the organization's allocation capped at 5% of the total project budget. Option number 4, from a housing outcomes perspective, is probably the best of the 4 options, but due to the requirement for additional funding, it has not been included as the administration recommendation at this time. This slide provides a bit of an overview of the 4 options and the allocations to each organization under each of those 4 options. And then if you look at columns 3 and 4, it shows the additional funding allocation that would be required if we were to utilize option 3 or option 4. If option 1 is selected, My City Care would get their full $500,000 request. Green Acres Foundation would get just over $1.1 million, which is 5% of their total project budget. And the Settle Canada Foundation would get the remaining dollars that totaled to $209,000. If option 1 is selected, the BIPOC Foundation would not get any funding, and Settle Canada Foundation would get funding that doesn't amount to 5% of their total project budget. So we would continue to work with those 2 groups to see if there's other avenues of municipal support for their project. On the screen, we have the recommendation now that it sounds like it will be divided, but it is just highlighting the allocation amounts to each of those 3 organizations and the conditions of funding that we would propose putting into the grant agreements. That being that the securement of the balance of project funding would be provided by June 30th of 2026. That's just to make sure that city dollars don't stay allocated to a project that ultimately doesn't ever get the fundraising. Those dollars would come back at that time if that condition isn't met. And it also includes the requirement for matching funding from the province or federal government, as well as a development permit for the project. And this would all be built in as milestone payments for the disbursement of funds. With that, I'm available for questions, and I know we also have representatives from each of the 4 applicant organizations that would be happy to answer your question as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much for the presentation, Mr. Pitcher. I do want to, I see there's questions from council already in the queue, but I do want to open it up, first of all, to the public, because some of these questions may be answered, and if not, if we can just wait until all of the questions and all of the information comes in, and then I'll turn over to the queue. So I'm going to ask if there's anybody in the gallery that wishes to speak to what has already been brought forward. There's anybody that wants to speak to any of what we've seen already. So on any of the information that was received from Mr. Pitcher. All right, ask the second time. Anybody wishes to speak to what they've heard? All right, seeing none, I'll turn over to questions from council, starting off with Acting Mayor Carlson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, through you to Mr. Pitcher, if I can. Just a question on these. We've approved funding for housing projects in the past, and then they go to different orders of government or other funding sources, and the money has been returned to us because they couldn't access us. What is the timeline on this? I would hate to tie up a bunch of money that may not be successful in, because I know that some of the other orders of government or other agencies want to see at least a 5% municipal contribution. And what I'm seeing here is it's not going to be 5% because we are out of money. So I guess how long would these dollars be tied up before they start to filter through other orders of government or other funding sources?
Yeah, absolutely. That's a perfectly fair question. And I can't seem to go back in the slides, but one more forward. Thank you. maybe a couple more, right there. If you look at the second half of of the first point there, where it states the securement of the balance of project funding on or before June 30th, 2026. So essentially what we are proposing is that we give these organizations their allocation from the municipality and give them until that point in time to go get funding from both the federal, provincial government, or other sources. And if they were not able to secure the balance of project funding by that point in time, there's that end date where those dollars are returned to the capital fund.
So that's what that is. So it's basically saying here's 16 months, and we'll know in 16 months whether they're successful or not.
Correct. And I might also include by saying the June 30th date was intentional, where we see some grants are open for intake throughout the year and some actually run on an annual cycle. For example, the provincial AHPP grant last year, or during the penultimate intake period, they opened in August and closed in October. And then in the more recent one, they actually opened right before Christmas and closed at the end of January. And so the timing is not always as consistent as we would like. And so this gives us an amount of time that we feel we'd feel fairly confident that we'd be able to meet all the different grants, at least one intake period for all the different grants.
Okay, thank you. Further to, if I can, Mr. Mayor, if we go down basically any of the routes, our funding source is depleted.
Correct.
Correct. Is there anything else? I know a bird in the hand is always worth two in the bush, but is there anything else coming down the pipe or the pike? Is it pipe or pike? I've never been pike. Pike. Oh, thank you. Or the oil pipe. Is there anything coming down the pike that we should be aware of? I'd hate to commit nearly $2 million and hold it for 16 months, and 5 months from now go, I don't want to say shiny, but something better.
I wouldn't want to say that there's nothing else, because we are always getting inquiries about what types of municipal supports could help housing projects. That said, with all the groups that I've worked with to date, these are the only ones that were prepared for a municipal request this time. So there are other groups that are looking to do things, and I think that's probably a conversation that needs to be looked at down the line. But at this point in time, there's nothing that is more shovel-ready than these 4 projects.
Okay, and finally, if committee recommends council support one of these options, and then council ultimately supports that at our next meeting, do we then put out a sign saying, yes, stop asking, we're broke?
So at this point in time, the grant itself is actually already formally closed for intake. We've been bringing these as ad hoc requests of council and committee. And so we just would express that when they come in and inquire with us.
Thank you, Councillor Middleton-Hope.
Thank you, Your Worship. So through the city manager, as we understand it, it's $1.8 million is currently available through this grant program, and all of these requests are certainly bona fide. There's $1.7 million in unavailable funding. So where would this additional funding come from? If we made a decision to allocate funds on an equitable basis to each one of these organizations, how would these organizations, or would these organizations be encouraged to go find the money elsewhere? And how would they be able to do that?
So, Councillor Middleton-Hope, in regards to the funding side, if there's any additional funding above the 1.8 million on so any of the different options, what it has in the report is that it would come from the remaining funding or the unallocated funding in the CIP. If you remember, that's that $10 million, originally was a $10 million amount of funding. Currently that there's just over $4.2 million of funding remaining in that fund. So it'd be allocating $1.7 million in one example of that funding out of that pot.
Okay, so that would come from the CIP. We're down to
currently at $4.2 million remaining out of that hasn't been allocated.
Okay, so that would reduce it by another 1.7?
1.7, yeah.
Okay. which again, as my colleague indicated, would reduce the likelihood, well, he's gone for coffee again, I guess. We would reduce the ability for us to address other projects. Now, what would happen if we allocated the funds that we've said are available, the 1.8 million, not the full fund, in the CIP. If we said, you've got 1.8 million, we're going to allocate this on an equitable basis to each one of these organizations, what happens? Can they go forward with the projects? Do they have to go looking for additional money? What happens?
So I'll pass it over to.
Yeah, so if we can go back to that, I think it's the third last slide. Yeah, so in that case, what you're describing is option number 2. Each of those organizations will get 51% of their total request amount. The concern under this option number 2, and the reason that I say that it's probably the least effective of our 4 presented options, is that it actually brings down all of them by 49% in this case. And so it leaves, I think, just one of the 4 organizations with that 5% of the total project budget, meaning that when they go to other grant funders like the province or the federal government, whoever that very next grant funder is may look at the municipal allocation and say, that's not enough skin in the game in order for us to buy into this. And so that's why we've recommended a prioritized approach for the use of the 1.8 million, because it then at least keeps those groups at either their full funding request amount or that 5% threshold, whichever is lower.
Okay, so the 1.8 million then you would prioritize based on the 4 projects that have been identified?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. And I don't see it on there, but which of the projects has allocated the funds?
So that would be option 1 is our recommendation, where Green Acres Foundation gets the 5% of that total project budget. So their request amount isn't funded in full because their full request amount actually exceeded 5%. My City Care's full request amount is allocated because it actually is less than 5% of their total project budget. Okay. And then the Settle East Canada Foundation receives the remaining dollars in that pot. It doesn't bring them to an amount that is 5% because the remaining dollars are not enough to bring them to that mark.
Does this, does this preclude any of these groups coming back at a later date, requesting those funds that are not allocated today?
Well, as the grant is closed for intake at this point, I think we would, similar to the question from Councillor Carlson, we would direct them not to bring it forward as an ad hoc request because the dollars weren't available.
Thank you.
I just have a question for that, Mr. Pitcher. I don't know if you can answer this if you have to turn to one of the organizations. I'm just, as I was looking through the different requests, and I'm speaking mainly to BIPOC Foundation and Settle Ease. It's, as I went to Settle Ease, it's my understanding that Settle Ease is, a majority of those folks are, so Settle Ease empowers BIPOC. So BIPOC and Settle Ease are the same?
No, they're 2 different organizations with
Same
2
people
separate
involved?
funding requests, 2 separate funding requests and 2 different projects.
Oh, so I'm seeing that, but I think the people involved, and maybe somebody can ask, are they not, people that are BIPOC are also on Settle Ease and vice versa, completely separate? No one's on BIPOC that is on Settle Ease? Okay. All right. Thank you. Now, so another question I can ask, and I don't know who can answer this one, is when I looked at Settle Ease Canada, that is a Lethbridge-based, from my understanding, and BIPOC serving similar from what, when I go through both, is there, can you tell me what the difference between the 2? Because I see international students, I'm seeing Black youth, family, men, women, and underserved communities across Canada for Settle Ease, and BIPOC, Black, Indigenous, and people of color, quite similar. Can you tell me what these differences are? Because I'm just trying to figure out if there's, if you can support all, can these 2 work together? I just need to know that.
Yeah, so a couple of key differences. Obviously, they're 2 independent projects, so they have separate scope of work and everything along those lines, different project budget, all those details. In terms of the demographics that they intend to serve, like you mentioned, the BIPOC Foundation is looking to serve new international students as they come in, and Settle East Canada Foundation is looking to support new immigrants and families, and so their units are planned to look quite a bit different than, maybe more of like that dorm style unit compared to an actual multi-bedroom housing unit with additional space for a family. And so I think that would be probably one of the key differences, and I would probably defer anything much further than that to the applicants themselves.
And I'm sure you've weighed these things out as well. When it comes to international students, and we've seen what's happened at both of our post-secondary institutions, well, two of them being the Polytechnic and the university, how that's currently is kind of that tap is turned off somewhat. Is there a concern from our administration when you're talking about that with dollars going to something that may not have international students to fill or occupy, has that been a concern that's been addressed?
I think our municipal housing strategy was completed last year and approved during summer of 2024, and it did identify both students and new immigrants as priority populations for housing. And so from that perspective, I think our strategy does support the need for these types of housing units. Obviously, these changes coming down the pike, as it was previously mentioned, that was a learning opportunity for me. I think that there's probably some more diving in that we need to do to get to a point, and that is maybe part of the reason that we have not included an allocation under our recommendation at this time for the BIPOC Foundation. Not to say the need isn't there, just that at this point they were probably the least shovel ready, and so that would be something that we would continue to explore as we looked at other avenues for support from the municipality.
Thank you for that. Councillor Crowson.
Thank you, Mayor Hagan. My question is actually for Mr. Lowen. I have a bit of a process legal question. And I just want for us, but also for the public, a couple of these would need to come back to us for zoning. One at least for sure, others are still acquiring a land. From a process perspective, if we were to give money to any process, that decision, whether or not we give money, would be completely irrelevant and not to be part of a discussion in a zoning hearing. Would I be correct on that?
It wouldn't be an appropriate consideration for council to hold in its head while they were making any land use zoning decisions.
So if we chose to give somebody money, we could, the zoning must be looked at completely separately.
You may find, wearing your hats today, that a project is worthy of funding, conditional upon zoning, and when you look at the zoning in the context of appropriate land use considerations, determine that that site is not an appropriate place for the project that you otherwise support. That is true. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Long. That's what I wanted, but I also want it to be stated publicly and to be out there. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Pitcher, but I want to speak to some of the people who are here before us. And we can go in whatever order. Option 1 has been suggested as the city's preferred option. I'd like to hear from the 3 that would be getting funding under that option. Would this be sufficient for you to carry on, or would that decision mean a halt to your project moving forward? So for Settlese, My City Care, and Green Acres, could you proceed under option 1? And whichever order, just make sure we get your name when you come up and which organization.
Thank you for the question. As far as My City Care is concerned, yes, we would be able to proceed, yes.
And can we just get your name? Because city clerks like recording everybody.
Yes. My name is Kelly Stickle, CEO of My City Care.
Okay, so My City Care could move forward under option 1.
Yes.
Okay, thank you very much. Please.
Thank you, Council, and everyone here today. My name is Anu Igagbon, and I'm for Settle It Canada Foundation. So actually, we've proceeded to submit our application to province. We would be moving forward when we get this approval, because it's one of the criteria to move to the federal level, the CMHC and the FCM fund. We will be able to proceed. It's not up to 5%, but we would definitely consider other options with Mr. Matt on how we could either get to 5% or have other alternative support to move forward. But we are committed to moving forward regardless. Thank you.
Perfect. And yes, Green Acres, please. I didn't know who'd speak for Green Acres. I'm shocked.
Thank you. I'm Donna Koslowy. I'm the CEO of Green Acres Foundation. And yes, to answer your question, allowing us to have this grant would allow us to be able to apply for the provincial grant as well as CMHC and FCM.
So you could move forward under option 1 as well?
We could move forward.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you, Mayor Hagan.
Thank you, Councillor Crowson. Appreciate those, because that first question had me wondering as well, because it almost seemed conflicting. So thank you for asking that. Deputy Mayor Palladino.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And Mr. Pitcher, you touched on this. You touched on this in your opening. I think on the BIPOC application. What do you attribute the low unit cost and city cost per unit that's so far out of the other three?
Yeah, that's, I mean, the request amount being at that $686,000 is quite a bit lower for a project of the scale than the other three organizations. And I think that would really come down to their plans for fundraising from other orders of government and those types of initiatives. I'd probably invite the BIPOC Foundation to actually speak to that further if they so desire.
Yeah, you can. So they're building, I understand that they're building per unit is about 250, where everybody else is in that 330 range. That's my question, basically. And the city cost per unit at 9,500 seems low compared to the others when you compare them. So if somebody can answer that, that'd be good. Great.
But might defer to the applicant in this case.
Spit out your marbles. Put the mic closer to your mouth.
Okay.
I'm right beside you.
I can hear it.
Look at this side.
Hey, Clements. How are you?
Mr. Mayor, councillors, thank you for the question. To answer your question, in our budget, well, there is a soft commitment of $250,000 that we have that has allowed us to request a little bit less than 5% of from the city, and that is what adjusted the cost for price per unit down significantly, and that's why you're seeing that difference.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Councillor Dodick.
Turn it back on.
Back on. Yes, my question is to Ms. Koslove. Sorry for making you come up.
You should have sat closer.
The Green Acres has requisitioning power, as we well know, and so the money that is being requested here, is that money that could be requisitioned through the requisitioning power that Green Acres has?
No. While I'd like to be able to say yes, that the answer is no. Under the Alberta Housing Act, because we are a housing management body that runs lodge operations that are subsidized, that's where the requisition goes. This is not a lodge. This is going to be affordable housing where people are independent. They will be having their own an apartment, basically.
Thank you for answering the question that it is a non-requisitionable request. I just needed to hear it. Thank you.
Sorry, Councillor Campbell, you were in and then you were out. How I must have canceled. Sorry, Councillor Campbell, then over to Councillor Middleton Hope.
Okay,
sorry, I deleted you out of there for some reason.
Mr. Pritchard, I just, I just wonder, you talk about if money cannot get allocated to some of these organizations or however this vote goes, and you say, well, you will be working with the organizations moving forward. Tell me how that works. What are some of the things that you would need to look into helping them find the next phase moving forward?
Yeah, and I think to answer that, it's a bit nebulous at this stage because our approach and the approach that most grant funders tend to expect from those equity partners is that they provide equity, that there be capital included. That said, they will sometimes include other considerations in lieu of that equity cash contribution. So there might be opportunities that we would work with Lethbridge Land on to see if there's opportunities for land that could potentially be either donated or sold below market value, potential tax deferral options. Those are all things that we would have to look at going forward and would ultimately require another decision of council. At this point, we haven't got into those too deeply yet, just because we're still at the capital request stage here.
So if for people who are applying, I mean, some of the things you can see here, it's important to have the land. It's important to have land zoned and other things. So those are sort of important parts of applying for these, right?
That's correct, and I think that's why I would say fairly confidently, option one is prioritized to those that are the most shovel-ready, and that is largely from the land perspective. Where are they with land securement? Where are they with the zoning of that land? Is it appropriately zoned? And so then from there, we can kind of start to go through and prioritize funding.
And as you say, that's what CHMC looks at as well, right? So they're kind of the boss here in a lot of ways.
Correct. We're forced to align to some degree with what they want if we want to support these projects in receiving their grant dollars.
Great. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Middleton Hope.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'm wondering if it would be appropriate for us to hear if there's anybody from BIPOC here. They just spoke? Did he had an opportunity to speak? What, I didn't hear him? Jesus. I couldn't see.
Did you?
So, well, then I would have a question for them.
All right. Sure. Come on forward.
I don't know. How did I miss you? It was the orange jacket, I'm sure. So the $351,000 under proposal number 2, is that going to get you to the finish line? The 351,000. So you don't get the whole amount, but you get about half of the amount. Does that help?
No, it doesn't.
Okay, so we might as well give you nothing then.
I think the options here, that doesn't take anything out of the city pockets. I understand why option 1 is preferred, because it doesn't take anything out of the city pockets. Option 2 looks good, but it will require significantly more time. We've already gone to get commitment of 250. It will require us to get, more than that.
Yeah.
And we're willing to do the work, but I think with the options that have been provided by city, that they will work with us, to look for more, equitable and, options that are, in kind and things like that to get to it. We want to do this project. We think it's going to be a good project. The mayor talked about a freeze. We understand that those are contingent, the real issues are housing related issues. So the project like this is being proactive. It's a 2-year freeze. The freeze is going to come away because international students are bringing funds into the community in so many ways. About $50 million annually, in investments from international students. So we are committed, and if the city will work with us, we'll be happy to work with them. Even if it's not today, we'll be happy to work with them, to get to something. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Then my next question to Mr. Pitcher would be, are they ready to be considered in the queue? BIPOC, are they ready to be considered in the queue?
I would say they are as ready as they can be without land at this point.
As what?
As they can be without land secured.
Without land secured. Okay.
Yeah, land
thank you.
securement is just the biggest hurdle that they face at this point, and so, yes.
Okay.
The proposal itself is quite well presented and provides a lot of information on the supporting need for it. And so I would say largely yes, just the land piece is going to be challenging, as it is for basically any multifamily housing project.
Right. And that's something that you indicated earlier you'd be working with them on?
Yeah, that's something we'd continue to explore after this point.
Okay, thanks very much.
Right. If we speak to someone with Settlese, I don't know who's represent for Settlese. And my question is, I look at option number 1, and I'll be very honest, we wish we could come and give the maximum, the full request to everyone, but we understand that that's sometime not in the cards, not feasible. But if I look at some of your mission and your vision, which I really like what you've got on your website, do you find that those that may not receive, so I'm looking at BIPOC, for example, work with them, because I know that BIPOC is going to continue to work with Mr. Pitcher and his team going forward, but I find it tough to have one not get and others get, but as far as working together, because again, I look at mission, vision, and there's a lot of similar values there. Is that something moving forward that possibly could be done with Settlese and BIPOC?
To summarize my response before going into explaining deeper, and thank you for that question. Yes, it's something we could definitely work together, though we have to consider some logistics. Currently, our application has gone to the province already. So it means we have to go back, either we're withdrawing it, which is like a year delay, or we're going to just update it. I don't know how all that will look like. And we've also started a conversation with CMHC, which have helped us map out our plan. So we just have to now go back and start talking about a different number of units and all those kind of things. It's something we will look into, definitely, but I cannot say for now because it all depends on those other arms of levels of government that we are considering for funding. So how that will fit into it. And just to give an overview of our projects, we are a non-profit organization. We are not focused on housing. We are focused more on socioeconomic development of the community, especially the BIPOC community, the Black and people of color, immigrants. So our focus here is economic resilience for the target population. So one of the means to an end is the housing projects we're doing. So we're looking at having a specific target population. So we are looking at new immigrants that has the potential to contribute economical growth in Lethbridge. So we have a very stringent criteria of screening those that are qualified for that. So you come into the country, we know that you're low income earner, you know that you're struggling, but you have credentials, you have potentials. We could see in you that if you have the right support you get, you will be able to contribute to our economy. You'll be able to live here. You'll be able to contribute to our economic growth. If you look at our overall proposal, you will see the economic index we are working towards in the next 5-10 years. So it's a very focused project, and it depends on who fits into that criteria. It could be an international student. Maybe the person is coming for PhD, and by the time we go through our screening tool, we realize that you have the tool to contribute to a future in Lethbridge. Then you will qualify for this housing project. Because our housing project is not just, you're not going to live there. You're going to be enrolled in a program with us. We're going to work with you in the next 2 years to look at what are your plans, what are your credential evaluation criteria, how do we support you. We're working with the University of Lethbridge. We are working with different agencies within the community, even across the province, to help them achieve this goal. So I cannot really say whether an international student will qualify, because we have this criteria, we have the assessment tool we are going to use to determine that. And we have a board of committee that will be sitting on that board to determine those that will qualify for that. It could be people from the economic development, Lethbridge as part of that. It could be people from Lethbridge Family Services, those key people that could make that decision to say, okay, this person has this potential. So it could fall into the description of their targets on this. That's fine, it could. But this is our own priority goal, because we want to be able to retain as much skilled immigrants as possible. When they come in as low-income earners, many of them after a few years, they cannot use their credentials. They get derailed, and they struggle. Then they become a liability instead of an asset to the community. They start depending on other incomes. But why can't we give them the extra boost, the extra support they need to be able to achieve their purpose? So that is our goal. And but we could definitely sit together with BIPOC Foundation, see how we can marry these two visions together. But it's not something I can commit to here, but we will look at the whole program description, how they fit into our bigger goals, and how the logistic areas can be streamlined based on how advanced we have gone. And yes, and so that's just the summary of your question.
And I appreciate that wholesome response, because it does really help me understand better of the work that you're doing. Is this, just to kind of follow up on some of the comments that you made, is this going to be the first project of its kind for Settlese, or Settlese have a whole bunch of these projects around? I couldn't find anything on here.
So this is a first project. That is why we call it a pilot innovation. So we're working with the FCM as well, because they have a funding to support pilot innovation on this kind of scope. So we are doing it as a pilot. We are going to document the process. We're working with the University of Lethbridge. They're going to attach a student to us that will walk through this process, document everything, turn it into a manual, so for people could see what's worked, what didn't work, what are the lessons learned, and then we can also use the manual. That will be an open document that is available to anyone that works in this space that can replicate it. So we are looking at the continuity and the sustainability of this project. So it is a pilot. That's where we are looking at 16 units. And once it is successful, everyone will hear the story. We are hoping to share it, and we will carry you along. We're planning to have a dedicated website for this, where we update the community committee, we update everyone on how this is going and how this is transforming. And by the time we cut the ribbon of opening this project, we are hoping to have learned a lot, and which will be able to replicate and scale we will be able to scale this project. So yes, this is a pilot project and it's the first one.
And just in closing here, is this something you're working hand in hand with the University of Lethbridge? Am I hearing that correctly?
So we're working with for the study part of it, the assessment part of it. So they are just we're working with them to assign a student to use it as a research project on how you can support people with housing and support them with some other socioeconomic integration, education skills, and all that. And does that translate into our end objectives? So that's the research part of it is what we are working with them on. But we have other partners we are working on the project. We are working with a lot of partners. For example, we are working with FWBA Architects. So they are on our project and they are providing the supervisory role because the project also includes an element of environmental sustainability. We are looking at net zero energy ready. So they are providing that overall assessment, the energy audit for us, and they also provide the overall construction supervision with us. And I think they're also represented here today if you have questions for them. So we are working with some key partners in the organization to help us also achieve our goals.
Okay. Thank you. Appreciate that. And with that, I see no further questions from council. So I do have a resolution, and it is going to be divided. So the first one is on 5.1A, which is this the one that to be divided? So this is the one that this one here. Okay. So the first one, Councillor Schmidt-Rempel will declare conflict on 5.1A, and we'll call you back for 5.1B then. Is that right?
I'll just sit and not vote because I can
Oh, you can.
sitting here. I just can't vote or participate in discussion.
Okay. No head nodges or anything. All right. So resolution from Acting Mayor Carlson, Affordable and Social Housing Capital Funding Request 5.1A. Be resolved that Economic and Finance Standing Policy Committee recommend that Council, number one, approve option 1 by allocating $500,000 from the Affordable and Social Housing Capital Fund to My City Care, conditional on A, the securement of the balance of the project funding on or before June 30th, 2026. B, the securement of funding from provincial or federal sources equal to or exceeding the municipal contribution. And C, the successful acquisition of a development permit for the project and subject to the execution of the city's third-party contribution agreement in a form with terms and conditions satisfactory to the city manager, and authorize the city manager and city clerk to assign the agreements. Oh, and it's just there is a question. Councillor Middleton Hope.
So are we going to have as motions each one of the options?
Number one will
only.
be by itself and the other three together.
No, he means looking at option 1. This is what Acting Mayor Carlson's bringing forward. If it fails, you can bring another one forward.
Correct. So this one here is just for My City Care as per option 1 that we'd already heard, which is the 500,000.
Because he's the one bringing it forward, and he chose to bring this one forward.
Why wouldn't we have each one of the options?
So we don't have each one because Councillor Schmidt-Rempel has a conflict on this one and cannot participate.
No, he's talking about big option 1, big option 2, like everybody gets 50%, everybody. Like
Oh, sorry. Okay.
Yeah, you had the 4 options that were presented to us.
I'll have Acting Mayor Carlson speak to that since he sponsored it. Go ahead.
And thank you, Mr. Mayor. This is the recommended option from administration. It is slicing our pie, what little funding we have left in what administration thinks is the best, could create the best outcomes for our community. I support them in option 1, but if this fails, then I think any of the other options are on the table.
Councillor Palladino?
You're supporting option 1 and then on this motion, but there's another one coming after.
There'll be one more after this.
Okay, that's what.
With the other 2 parts in it.
Because Jen can't vote on it, and then those 2 will come.
Okay, that's it, perfect.
This is just for the first project, option 1. That is it. My City Care, 500,000, option 1 that we've heard. And
Correct.
recommendation.
Thank you.
That's it. All right, with that, to open debate, I'm sure you probably already have, but go ahead.
Thank you,
Councillor
Mr.
Carlson.
Mayor. I appreciate all the thorough questions and the excellent proposals in our community. I think we've heard around the table here that we wish we had more money. But the well is running dry on this. So I'm hoping that with this allocation of funds, and I appreciate the work our administration has done to sort of prioritize how we could hopefully get the best funding for our community. But I'm hoping with this allocation of dollars that all the groups will be successful and we will get all of these housing units built in our community. But for this one on its own, we did hear from the My City Care folks that they believe they can go forward with this. And so I'd ask for my colleagues' support.
And debate, Councillor Campbell.
I basically this will kind of be my debate for all of what comes forward is the building housing is really, it's a marathon, it's not a sprint, and things change, money becomes available next year or the year after. What we have right now, we're allocating to some wonderful projects. My applause to all of the foundations that are here today and willing to put forward their vision. But we have to go with what administration says. Administration is in the trenches with this. They're dealing with HCMC. They're dealing with rezoning and what land is available. So they're in it all the time. So you have to kind of accept what they think is the best way moving forward, and the fact that they're also willing to work beyond this with the other organizations if they don't get their funding, that we will continue on with this marathon. So in this case, I am in full support of the resolution.
All right, with that, Acting Mayor.
Councillor Pella, or Deputy Mayor, I saw you were in the queue. You're good? Oh, sorry. Then I will call for the vote.
Question's been called. All in favor? And that is unanimous. Unanimous for those that were voting. Thank you. All right. Next, we'll move on. I do have a resolution from Councillor Schmidt-Rempel. Affordable and social housing capital funding request 5.1B. Be it resolved that Economic and Finance Standing Policy Committee recommend that Council, number 1, approve option 1 by allocating $209,704.45 from the Affordable and Social Housing Capital Fund to the Settle Ease Canada Foundation, and B, $1,104,432,055 from the Affordable Social Housing Capital Fund to the Green Acres Foundation, conditional on A, the securement of the balance of the project funding on or before June 30th, 2026, B, the securement of funding from provincial or federal sources equal to or exceeding the municipal contributions, and C, the successful acquisition of a development permit for the project and subject to the execution of the city's third-party contribution agreement in a form with terms and conditions satisfactory to the city manager, and number 2, authorize the city manager and city clerk to sign the agreements. Questions, Councillor Crowson?
I'm in for debate, not questions.
All right, and Councillor Carlson, debate your questions. Go ahead.
And thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm just curious, and I should have caught this on the previous resolution, but when you read, where the heck is it? Conditional on B. It says securement of funding for provincial or federal sources. I wouldn't want it to be conditional on those two, and I'd like to actually make an amendment to the previous one as well. If they find some private donor that wants to match it, find the dollars that are equal or greater than our contribution. Any source. Yeah, except theft. That's exactly what I would like to make the amendment for. If that makes sense, and I saw Mr. Pritchard run. So I better check that I'm not screwing up something.
And so if there's, sorry, go ahead, Mr. Pitcher.
If that's the desire to not necessarily have a matching component from either the provincial or the federal government, and the intent is just to get the whole amount of project funding not funded by the city, then I think that condition B could just be removed in its entirety. Because condition A actually already contemplates the entire amount of project funding before June 30th, 2026. B is just that a portion of that balance be from the federal or provincial government, which from our perspective could be removed.
Okay. I have no issue with that. I would just hate to see a project fail because they got Councillor Dodick wanted to contribute the dollars instead of the province. No, I don't think he wants to either, but I guess it was just, are there any issues to removing clause B? Oh, then I hate that. All right, I will leave it in there. Thank you.
So just as is fine.
As is?
All right, and thank you for that, because that does maybe put a little bit of a heat. Yeah. All right, no further questions. Councillor Schmidt-Rempel to open debate.
I'll save my comments for closing debate.
All right, Councillor Crowson.
Thank you, Mayor Hagan. I absolutely would have loved to have funded everybody to the full amount that they requested, but we do not have that much money in the account, and BIPOC doesn't yet have their land, and I hope BIPOC will be back when they have their land. At that point, maybe we have funding, but at this point, I think the way we are choosing to do this, help move these projects along, help show the provincial and federal governments and any other funders they may find that these projects are worthy and need to be considered. And I am hopeful that we will continue to see more housing being built. I congratulate Mr. Pitcher and our staff and everyone else involved for getting the units, the 309 units that have already been built. I figured that out, that with the money we put forward, we were putting in about $18,000, of course, per unit, which is not, bad when you're seeing a completed unit coming in with funding much higher than the leveraging, much higher than we put in, and the leveraging is greatly appreciated. Hoping we can do the same here by using this money. We know housing is an absolutely vital thing that we need in our community. This will help a wide variety, This will help a wide variety of residents in Lethbridge, and I hope my colleagues will support this.
All right, with that, back to the mover.
Thank you very much. We know we have a very serious housing shortage in our city, and today we have groups that are bringing forward solutions that align with our municipal housing strategy and will work towards addressing that housing shortage. However, the reality is that we have very limited funds. Before us, we have a viable funding option and a commitment from our staff to work with organizations to support the housing projects before us. I would have loved to have funded everyone for their full amount, and I thank all the groups and our staff for their work on these projects and bringing the options forward to us. And at this time, I think we are seeing the best funding option. With that, I will ask for my colleagues' support on this.
Question's been called. All in favor? And that is unanimous. Thank you. And if I can have a motion to go in closed. Oh, be it resolved. Yeah.
Perfect.
Be it resolved that we do now enter a closed meeting at 2:24 p.m. to discuss confidential matters with respect to 7.1 and 7.2 as per Section 24 advice from officials of the Freedom of Information Protection and Privacy Act. And that is moved by, sure, Councillor Carl Crowson. All in favor? Yeah. That's all right. Thank you. All right, we'll move along with resolutions coming from closed, starting with a resolution from Councillor Middleton Hope, Municipal Controlled Corporation Development Update. Be it resolved that the Economic and Finance Policy Committee directed the closed meeting documents, discussions, and presentation with respect to the Municipal Controlled Corporation Development Update remain confidential pursuant to Section 24, advice from officials of the Freedom of Information Protection of Privacy Act. Question's been called. All in favor? And that's unanimous. Thank you. No. And the next one, which we'll have up on the screen, is be it resolved, and this is a resolution from... Oh, you're on there. Oh, sorry. From Councillor Crowson. Thank you. Be it resolved that the Economic and Finance Standing Policy Committee direct that the administration return to the March 11th City Council meeting with options regarding the capital improvement program planning item, and further be resolved that closed meeting discussions with respect to capital improvement program planning verbal remain confidential pursuant to Section 24, advice from officials of the Freedom of Information Protection of Privacy Act. Councillor Crowson.
This, once again, is one of those motions upon which worlds will collide if we don't actually pass. I hope my colleagues will support this, and everybody needs to show up March 11th to see what the final results are. Please vote in favor.
Stay tuned.
Stay tuned. Thank you very much. And with that, question's been called. All in favor? And that...
Are you at the door? What's going on?
March 11th, 2025, if we can put on there. Just make that a change. Is that all right with you, Councillor Crowson? Yeah. Thank you. And with that, we are adjourned. Thank you.